This is the first part of the data security blog for Teach Technology Organization Incorporate. We'll be hearing from Joel Cardella and Chris Mattson, who both work in the security field at Thermo Fisher Scientific. And Thermo Fisher Scientific is essentially a company that distributes resources for science. However, because Thermo Fisher Scientific operates on a global scale, security is obviously a very important aspect of their company. So we'll be hearing from these two people in order to grasp a better understanding of data security. Thus, without further ado, we can get into the questions. First off, why is data security important?
Yeah, sure. No, data security, as it relates to Thermo Fisher, obviously is extremely important. We do a number of things, whether we're creating new ways to remediate, viruses such as COVID-19. So there's a lot of intellectual property, is what they call it, from a corporate perspective, that we own and maintain. So ensuring that we protect ourselves and we protect our customers' information.
Security is pretty foundational to everything nowadays. Even if you don't see it, it's there.
With so many oppressors and so much at risk, what are some measures that you have to take in order to ensure that data is secure?
So one of the other core concepts that we talk about in security is this thing we call defense in depth. And defense in depth, what that means is kind of like an onion, right? Where the onion starts in the center, it's got all these layers around it. We layer security on top of things. So if we look at the context of the human being entering data, we want to make sure that there are controls for the human to enter data so it can minimize the amount of errors that they make. So we'll put some controls in there. Maybe we're controlling the data they're allowed to enter, right? So we put a control there. So there's the human element. Then there's the system element. When the system is processing things, does it need to process things sort of in the open, or does it need to do it in a very confined space where other systems can't be aware of what it's doing, right? That's an example of confidentiality.
There's the measures that we take to ensure that our data is secure, to ensure that our corporation's secure. It's continuous. So there's things that we're continually doing, whether it's through due diligence and ensuring that our tool sets are meeting the evolutions of bad actors, as they call them, that try to gain access or try to steal data from us. We have a secure operations center that funnels in all of the reporting and potential alerts around things from a security perspective. We also have a threat management center, and the threat management center allows us to really stay on the cutting edge of news and new ways that people try to steal or to try to do harm to the corporation. I think what we've seen and what we've tried to do historically is prioritize risk. So we have a risk team, and they capture all of these risks and they rank them, from a low, medium to high perspective.
Yeah.
And then based off of those risks, it helps us prioritize what we need to do from a CIS and corporation perspective.
Red means attacker, okay? So red teamers are people who attack. These are professional security people that are paid to go and hack into instruments. We actually employ some of them in my team. I hire hackers. Those hackers hack on our instruments so we can deploy them to our customers with a reasonable degree of confidence that they can't be exploited as if we hadn't done it. On the blue side, that's the defenders. So the red teams hack, the blue teams see how the hack works, they construct the defenses. So red team and blue team. And then purple team is kind of a mixture of both. They do both attack and defense. But in security, we really break it down between red and blue, and that's how we operate a lot. And the watch phrase that we use for that is offense informs defense. So when I can see the techniques that you're using to hack, I can build defenses against. Yeah, we want to try to make it as hard as possible for systems to be compromised. And the truth of the matter is there is no such thing as perfect security. Nothing is bulletproof. There always is a vulnerability somewhere. Somebody's going to find it. So what we try to do is we try to make that as difficult as possible to find or exploit once it's found.
Another question that I had that I feel is applicable to all of us and could assist us in a multitude of ways is how can we keep our data safe on both a personal scale and an enterprise scale?
Okay, those are great questions. So the first thing is personally, you want to try and be aware, for instance, of the apps that you're using on your phone. You want to know whether those apps are accessing your data. A lot of apps want to access your contacts. Well, you have to think about it and say, does this app need to know my contacts? In many cases, really it doesn't, right? Does the app that tells my weather need to know who's in my address book? No, they really don't, right? So you need to be careful. Social media is a big thing, right? Social media really excels in the space of people and connecting and uniting people. On the same side of that, it's because it's exploiting the data that's around those people. So you have to be careful of that too. So if you're, Snapchatting or TikToking or Facebooking or whatever's happening, you need to be aware that your data is being accessed and being used in some way that you may not necessarily want to be used. So that's one thing that people just have to pay attention to is, this app might be fun, but, is the fun worth maybe what the app is actually trying to access in terms of my personal data? Because some apps too can track you across other apps, right? That's a big deal. That's mostly done for advertising reasons, but other apps do it for other reasons that clearly they don't really need to. So that's one thing. Pay attention to that on a personal level, and that's probably the best advice that I can give people is just be aware that a lot of these things are out there. And the really thing to be aware of is if something gets very, very popular, be careful because a lot of hackers who are criminals will try to create programs just to draw people in. On the enterprise side of the world, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are strong with our e-commerce because e-commerce is very, very big, especially during COVID. We've seen a huge uptick with e-commerce and that we are at those lowest levels of security, making sure those transactions can occur in a very safe and secure way, regardless of what the transaction is, right?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I think that there's things that we can all do to help keep ourselves safe. Things as simple as ensuring that we have good passwords on our accounts, that we're not using one password for everything, and we're using passwords that are not necessarily complex where they're hard to remember, but it's almost recommended that you kind of have a password that's just very long, at least 15 characters long. Because when you do that, it makes it much, much harder for people who want to crack that password to do so, because there's so many algorithms and there's so many options for all of those characters for their applications and programs to run through. So the longer your password, the better. It's not necessarily the more complex or just adding an @ symbol to a word that has an A or putting a 1 at the end of a character or a normal word, because just dictionary words are very easy to crack. Yeah. Enterprise and what we do at Thermo Fisher, and this also relates to personal, so I guess I can kind of cover both, is through email. It's basically understanding that it's readily easy or very easy for individuals now to mimic other companies. Whether if they want to send you a company like an email saying you haven't paid your gas bill, if you don't pay it and hit this link, your gas is going to get turned off. Yeah. You have to be very cognitive of the emails you receive and most importantly, the links that you click within those emails. So from a company perspective, we have routine phishing campaigns, and that's what it's called. It's called email phishing. So we send out fake emails on a monthly basis to everybody to see if they click to see if they click the links within those emails. And if they do, we provide them information on why it's important for them to stop and think about the emails and the links that they click on, because it could take them to outside, bad actors, and they could download information to your computer and they can steal information. So from both a personal and corporate perspective, it's very important to practice, those types of processes and procedures. It's important that, if somebody calls you and say, you need to pay us right now, give me your credit card number, your gas is going to get turned off. Just say, okay, thank you for the call. I will hang up now and call my gas company and then ask them. Sometimes, as with emails, phone calls are also very easy to mimic, and they can say they're coming from the company or coming from somebody important, when in fact they're not. They're just using IP telephony and application on a PC to do so.
Yeah.
Right. There are some that will come through looking very professional. You have to dig a little harder and take a look at it sometimes.
So where is data security in the coronavirus pandemic?
We're making all these test kits. So we're producing thousands and thousands and thousands of test kits, and we want to get them out. We want to get them to the people that need them. We could get an email saying, this invoice hasn't been received for us to accept, your shipment. We need this information. And without thinking, and in that stressful panic type situation, you could do something that could potentially, harm the company. So we always have to remain very, very vigilant, even more so now as a company, because Thermo Fisher is being targeted from that perspective.
COVID-19, because it is a pandemic, and it does deal with people. People means sensitive data. So whenever we talk about people, we talk about sensitive data. We talk about people as patients in a medical setting, and patient data is sensitive data. So COVID data is very sensitive. The GDPR, that actually comes out of Europe, and that is a very strong standard of data protection that other countries are also trying to model. And they really say that anything that can be used to identify a person, a name, an address, an email, your medical history, right? Anything that can be used to actually identify a person needs to have reasonable degrees of security around it. So really COVID to me means medical, which means patient, which means protected. And that's how we go about it. So anything that we do with COVID, and really anything that anybody does with COVID, is going to fall under that umbrella of protected data.
Thank you for your time, and we really appreciate what you had to say. Also, please be sure to take a look at the article and part 2 that will come out soon.